Hey Emma,
Yes, Valen.
what do you say when you're telling your friend Nicole that she can do something?
I don't know. What do you say?
You say, "You may, Nikki." Hello, and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
So, how was my joke?
It was great, Valen. It was just a great joke.
I was setting up, and I was talking to Clickbait Boyfriend about the show, and he was like, "Oh, like it's like you may, like what do you, your friend Nikki, like you may," and I was like, "How dare you? That's gonna be my joke." So he insisted that I say that he's very witty and clever.
Okay. Yeah. It's been noted. It's on the official record.
Entered into the record. I thought it was, it stretches it a little bit less than it usually does.
Yeah.
Does that count for nothing?
No, you didn't stretch it at all. It's very, very, very good steps for you.
You're disappointed. I can tell. You miss it. You miss my jokes that don't even sound like the game title anymore.
I do kind of miss them.
It could have been like, what do you call it when you get a very small glass of yummy beer?
Impossible.
Funny, but we happy brew.
Thanks for putting the stress so that people can understand what you're saying.
I thought people would be like, small?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's been a while since I've told, it feels like years, but has only been a couple weeks since I've told a joke for the show. Mm-hmm. So I'm just trying to flex that funny bone a little bit.
You haven't done it since last year.
I can't believe you made that joke and not me.
Well, it's just because you said it had been years, so it's basically just like asking to be told.
It was asking for it.
Uh-huh.
Well, folks, thanks for tuning in to Talk This. It's been a while since we've had what one might call a traditional main episode.
Yeah.
We've been venturing off on lots of various side quests and parallel story quests lately, and it's good to be back to the story mode of this podcast.
Yeah.
So, as you might have guessed from my joke and bonus joke, both of which were super funny, I think we can agree.
Yeah.
This week, we'll be talking about Yume, Nikki, and We Happy Few. So, starting off the year on a nice, spooky note.
Yeah, they're both
That's
both
mostly
pretty
took
creepy.
away. Mostly what I took away from my research this week is, wow, we managed to pull the spooky games.
Yeah. I don't know if I would call We Happy Few spooky. It's like creepy.
Creepy.
It's not,
sure.
It's there's not much like paranormal activity, right?
That's fair. Not that there is necessarily in Yume Nikki either.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
The freaky games. How
Yeah,
about
there
that?
you go. Freaky games.
So, our old game this week is Yume Nikki, which I think really is in many ways, is one of the most notorious games maybe ever in its own way.
Mm-hmm.
So Yume Nikki, it's a Japanese game that was originally released in June of 2004, kind of like on basically like Japanese 4chan.
Mm-hmm.
They call it 2channel,
Mm-hmm.
which at first I was like 2channel, but then I forgot like 4chan probably is short for like channel. So I'm feeling especially dumb today, folks. So hop on board this train. It literally means dream diary.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because it translates as if like Nikki is a character in the game, and it's not.
Yeah.
I think it's just a transliteration of the Japanese. Yeah. But it does make it kind of a catchy title. It makes it sound like it's some kind of ninja girl game.
It does, yeah.
Like it really sounds like this is like a Japanese take on like Tomb Raider.
That's
Like,
interesting.
I don't know why that's when I was before I researched it and I was like, oh right, I have heard of this game. I was like, oh, Yume Nikki, like I don't know why.
I wonder what you were actually thinking of.
Almost certainly nothing. But I don't know why it made me think of like it's like a ninja girl game.
I'm sure there are
excited.
ninja girl games, so
I would be excited to play a Ninja Girl game, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And if you titled it Yume Nikki, well, who's going to stop you?
No, but Yume Nikki is sort of it's an RPG maker game. Not really horror, but sort of weird adventure sort of game.
Yeah, so in some ways this game is very easy to describe, and in others it's basically impossible.
Yeah.
So you play as, and there's a Japanese term for this, but basically this like young woman hermit named Maratsuki. Which that was funny to me. Not funny, that would be a rude thing to say, and I obviously didn't say that. But it's interesting to me that this idea of like a young person shut in is like a Japanese trope.
Yeah.
It definitely put Persona in a little bit of a different light as to why no one seems that concerned that Futaba has been in her room for years.
Yeah.
But basically you play as this like young woman who, for whatever reason, is unable to leave her room. If you try to leave your room, she'll just shake her head at you. But when she goes to sleep at night, she can leave her room, and that is where things get freaky. So there are all these doors that lead to all sorts of other kind of bizarre worlds, and you can wander around them. And that's basically it. There's no story of any real capacity.
Mm-hmm.
The goal, if you can call it that, goal in incredibly heavy quotations, is to collect 24 items called effects, which affect your gameplay. Haha, effects affect your gameplay. You can get like a knife, there's a bicycle, there's other things that change the way you move and the things that you can do, but not in tremendously game-changing ways. And when you collect all 24 effects, the game is over, and that is it. So, it's interesting to me. It is difficult for me to understand the appeal of this game, given that it is like the proto open world game, right? It's like the open world game in its purest form.
I guess so. Not really, though.
I mean, sort of. It's a ton of areas to explore. No instructions from the game about what you're doing or why. And no reason you can't, go wherever, pretty much.
But, you can't leave your room, so...
Sure, but you can at night. In your dreams.
Yeah.
Just because it's an open world game doesn't mean there can't be, I can't go to Africa in Breath of the Wild. That doesn't mean it's not an open world game.
Fair.
So it's hard for me... When people write about this game, they talk about how fascinating it is to explore and kind of creepy, and how it's kind of an isolating experience to play it because it's hard to explain to people, and you're just kind of wandering through all of these weird areas with no real explanation. And to me, it's like, why would I want to do that? I don't know.
I mean... There's this appeal to it in that it is a dream, right? And dreams mean things, right? So you have all this sort of surreal imagery and things happening, and there's no real explanation for it, but you feel like there should be an explanation for it, right? Because this is this character's subconscious in some sense. So there's, the idea that, you play it and then you talk to people about it and, what does it mean? And this is what I think this means, or, something like that. It's more of, a character study. A really weird character study in a lot of ways. Particularly considering the fact that she is this shut-in who refuses to leave her room. And there's also the mystery, nobody knows anything about... the game's creator at all.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say, is I really think that the meta-narrative around this game really is a major part of the fact that it became this kind of cult. I don't even want to call it a cult classic, because that's not even right. It's just it gained this cult following because there is this mysterious developer who goes by the name Kikiyama, but no one knows who they are, or anything about them, right? Oftentimes I feel like when there's a mysterious developer, it's like, okay, like, yeah, maybe you don't know who they are, but it's like, you at least know some things about them, but there's, like, almost nothing. Kikiyama prefers to communicate in Japanese. That's about all that we've got.
Yeah.
People have claimed that so another interesting thing about Yume Nikki is that over the course of 3 years, from 2004 to 2007, there were sort of semi-regular updates, fixing things and adding things to the game. And then Kikiyama apparently disappeared for like a decade. And there's like even speculation about Kikiyama and whether like they died in an earthquake because someone, so in like a very early version of the game, somewhere in a read-only file, there's an email address that people think must belong to Kikiyama. And somebody claims that they've emailed that address and that Kikiyama thanked them for playing Yume Nikki, but that the last email known to have come from that address was shortly before this like big earthquake in Japan, and then nothing else came. So Kikiyama probably died in the earthquake, people think. But apparently not. I mean, one, weird thing to be speculating about to begin with. But two, apparently not, because the Yume Nikki story only gets weirder in, like, the world where this could be in our new game category. Because at the beginning of 2018, Yume Nikki, which up until this point, it had at some point been acquired by a real developer, but for many years, you really could only get it through, like, files that people shared with you, you know, which is, like, a weird thing to think about now. But, like, literally, like, shared file downloads. Like, that's the only way you could get this game. And there wasn't even an official English translation of it until, like, 10 years after it came, almost 10 years after it came out. But then, in the beginning of 2018, it mysteriously appears on Steam for free. Which I probably should have downloaded and played it for this episode. Yeah. But it's been a stressful week.
I probably should have done it too, so it's fine.
I just, like, couldn't imagine making myself play this game. I was like, why would I do this to I'm not going to enjoy this. Like, this game is the antithesis of what I enjoy about video games.
Well, I think it's because you get frustrated with, like, Legend of Zelda because you get game over so much, right? There's no game over, really, in
That's true. That's true.
You can get stuck some places, but you can always just wake up, or sometimes your effects can get you out of it. But there's no, like, death in the game to set you back.
I am, to a fault, goal-oriented.
But you do have goals. You have goals. You have clear goals.
And I like for my games to have a story that makes me tear up a little bit at the end.
Would this one not?
It doesn't seem that way. It seems, just, like, wander around, find stuff if you want or not. Game's over.
No, there's an ending scene.
I know, but, like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I feel differently about this because I don't really classify it in that same sort of thing. Like, I don't know how much I would enjoy it, but I don't necessarily think I would be bored of it. That makes sense.
I guess so.
Plus, it's free, so, you know.
No, it's true, and, you know, maybe I'll download it and play a little bit if I have time this week and blog about it, but, I don't know. This game feels like if someone was like, let me create a game that has nothing that Madelyn likes about playing video games. Not to say it's a bad game.
Yeah.
In any way. Just to say, like, it's incredible how much this manages to be the opposite of my taste. It's kind of scary. There's not very much gameplay element to it other than walking around. And there's not really a story that's decipherable to anything. Like, it's super interesting as a case study of, like, in the vein of, like, how people used to feel when Lost was on TV, right? Of, like, what does it all mean? And granted, Lost kind of dropped the ball right at the end when they did explain what it all meant.
Yeah.
And everybody hated it.
That's the that's the thing, though. Like, if you're really going to commit yourself to, like, the mystery, like, the creator can have their opinion of what it means. But I always feel like it's best when it's, like, it's not real, it's metaphorical, right? It's not like, there's some real, deep lore explanation for what is happening. It's more like, well, it's happening because of the way the characters are. I feel like I'm more drawn to it because I really like character studies in, like, books I read and stories I read. Like, and I don't feel like games have really tried to do a lot of just, like, character sort of study things. Like, even when there's no plot, it's more like, what is this island? Ooh, it's about the place you are, not about the person you are. Which I feel like is what distinguishes it from some other stuff we've talked about, like The Witness, for instance, or stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's fair. I guess it's interesting to me because I'd love to see more games attempt this, but again, reading about this game, I was like, why is this a video game? This seems like, to me, like something that would more naturally be like a trippy short film or a short story. Not to say that it shouldn't be a video game, just that, especially.
Well, I think that the visuals are a big part of it, so that's why it's not a short story.
Sure, that's fair, but it makes me wonder why not some kind of a trippy short film. Mostly because we've started talking about for our paper about kind of the entertainment factor of games, right? And just for me, this just doesn't. Again, because it feels so opposite my taste, it's hard to be like, what is the entertainment factor of this game?
Mm-hmm.
But it's fascinating, all of the lore that's developed around it, and they released like a 3D reboot of it too.
Yeah, that people didn't like very much.
Right, and they're saying Kikiyama is attached to it, but like, who really knows, right?
Yeah.
I find the like mystery of who the creator is almost more fascinating than the game.
Yeah, I think that, and I wrote a little bit about this for a paper in school, but I think that people didn't like the 3D reboot because the way the dreamlike nature of the game is so suited to these like weird pixelated RPG maker style that once you bring it to 3D, it sort of loses some of that eerie atmosphere to it.
Yeah, it's tacky.
Yeah, like there's a difference between like old games that were clearly trying for, TV style quality and just didn't have the graphical capabilities back then, being updated to look really good now because that's the way they wanted them to look when they first made them. But with stuff like this, it feels very much like this is how it's supposed to look. It's not just like the graphical capabilities weren't there or whatever. There's a lot of like RPG Maker horror games that I know people consider like cult classics. So this platform seemed to draw a lot of like weird indie developers. Well, indie developers who want to make weird things.
Yeah. And I was seeing a lot of analysis of Yume Nikki as like it's from a different era of indie game development, right? Mm-hmm. It's hard to imagine somebody doing something like this and remaining so mysterious and having it be so viral in 2019.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Especially the viral part, just because it's hard to ever go viral at all when you're an indie maker now. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know it served as some amount of inspiration. Like, I was reading an article that was saying that the Lisa series sort of took inspiration, which I only played Lisa the Painful, but yeah, that's another one that's like, I wouldn't want a 3D remake of this.
Well, there are a lot of fan games around this, apparently. There's another one that also has kind of a freaky thing. It's spelled LCD Dem. It's Lucid Dream, but skipping every other letter. And that was like a semi-popular one that people really liked. And then one day the developer just took it down and had a note on their site of like, please don't talk about this game anymore. Please don't even mention it.
Yeah.
And it's like, what? Like, it's fascinating, just like the weirdness on weirdness on weirdness that surrounds this game. And I don't think, and we can talk, we're moving into another game that has sort of like mixed response and is like kind of odd and creepy and weird.
Yeah.
We can talk about that, but I can't imagine someone making a game quite this weird and being able to stay anonymous about it and having anybody notice.
We Happy Few is actually a nice parallel because of how the fans and creators have interacted also.
Definitely.
Like, for the amount that, like, Yume Nikki is very much, like, the creator's creation, right? And it's gotten a lot of inspiration, but you don't know anything about the creators. Whereas We Happy Few changed a lot based on fan reception to its original incarnation, which I find interesting.
Yeah, and if any of you had ever read my published paper about myth making in religious film, you'd know that Yume Nikki really does a great job of creating some synchronicity between its internal myth, its storytelling, and its external myth about all of the mystery around it and the mystery of the developer and all that.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's probably why it blew up so much, because it was all super coherent, and we like a coherent message.
Yeah.
It makes sense that maybe Kikiyama is also a shut-in who is writing about being a shut-in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why people were literally like speculating about whether this person had killed themselves. And that's why no one had ever heard from them.
Lovely.
I know. It's like,
I mean, I guess it is natural to, like, especially if the fact that they did post these updates and then stopped, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's only natural to be like, I wonder where they went, or I hope nothing happened to them or something like that. But
yeah. But evidently they're fine, or someone who's doing a good job pretending to be them is fine.
Yeah.
Either way. That would be sick, actually. I hope this is someone pretending to be them.
Maybe it's a bunch of people. Maybe it's always been a bunch of people.
Who frickin' knows?
Maybe it's a group.
It's all a mystery. So, shall we talk We Happy Few?
We shall. So We Happy Few is a game that came out, well, it was released as an early access title back in 2016, but the full game came out this past year.
And the full game is somewhat to quite different from the early access.
Yes. So it's from Compulsion Games, as well as published by Gearbox, which Gearbox is going through some stuff right now. Have you seen this?
What, exactly?
We can talk about it off screen. There's just a lot of weird stuff happening with Gearbox right now. But anyway, yeah, they just...
And it's not, it was not, Gearbox didn't develop this game. Like,
no, they're the publisher. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Compulsion has since been bought by Xbox, but We Happy Few, since it was in development before then and was being published by Gearbox, ended up on all platforms. They're now a Microsoft game company, but it doesn't apply to this one. But it's a first-person game combining sort of role-playing, survival elements. There are 3 protagonists, I feel like. Yeah.
Arthur, Sally, and Ollie.
Yeah. So it's an alternative version of, like, post-World War II, World War II in, like, alternate UK, basically. So you live in the fictional city of Wellington Wells, which is a dystopia, but people don't know that because they use this hallucinogenic drug called joy that sort of keeps them unaware of what things actually look like around them. There's also a bunch of people who wear, like, weird masks on their faces that make them smile. Yeah, some weird stuff. But it's interesting because when it first came out, it wanted to be more of, like, a procedurally generated sort of thing, right?
It still uses procedural generation, but yes.
it wasn't really focusing on the narrative of it.
Yeah, it was more of a survival game than it turned out to be.
Yeah. But when people got their hands on the early access version that they came out, they're like, man, this setting is so cool. I wish things were happening in it in the central story. And they were like, oh, we didn't even think about that. And apparently they actually got a little bit like overwhelmed trying to like add the central narrative to it, because it just wasn't initially in their plans, hence why there's such a large gap between when it went early access and when it actually saw a full release.
Yeah, and I think I read that part of their rationale in wanting to have an early access version available is, so this was originally a Kickstarter project.
Yeah.
And because it is such a strong concept and people were really excited about it, the developers were worried that when they got a game that was not AAA quality or size or whatever, that people would be really pissed.
Yeah.
So by releasing some of it early access, they were able to say, this is what the game's gonna be, like,
yeah,
don't expect it to be, Call of Duty.
Yeah. I mean, that is a real problem for indie devs, I feel like. I mean, some people deal with it like Hellblade was sort of they called themselves a AA title, and also sold it for $30. Ninja Theory, who made Hellblade, which is sort of like a similar, in fact, probably, I don't know if it would be less than the amount of work that would have to go into We Happy Few, but certainly comparable amounts of work. Although I think We Happy Few has more complicated gameplay mechanics that ended up not working so well in the long run.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't like any game that has survival mechanics, so that generally tends to be my, if I have to sleep or eat and keep myself fed or whatever, that's an issue for me.
Deep truth, son, talk this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the game sounds really fascinating. And then I was reading the reviews, and they were like, this is well, some of them are raves.
Yeah.
Like Polygon?
I think Polygon really liked it, yeah.
Yeah. But it also, I was reading the review of that, and I was like, there are things that the other reviewers seem to understand about the story that, like, you don't seem to understand. Like, this other reviewer did not seem to have the answers for. And so it was clear to me, it's like, you haven't finished the game.
See, I think that's fine, though.
No, I do think that's fine.
As long as they tell you how much they've played, which I believe Polygon and Kotaku, and Waypoint at least do, that's fine. Like, tell me how much you've played,
I'm not saying that you have to finish the game to write a review. I agree, I think that's dumb. But I just think it was interesting to see the discrepancy between that review where the guy was so excited and thought the story was so cool and the whole thing was so cool, and the reviewer was also British, so I was like, okay, like you're especially, not that that's, whatever, of course you can be British and write game reviews, but you're especially excited about this because it's like, it's kind of cool for you.
Well, but it's actually kind of a critique of Britain, isn't it?
Yes, but still, like, I would be excited to see someone make a cool game that was a successful critique of the US system.
I guess so, yeah.
Or of, like, I would be excited to see someone make a game that was like, man, like, let's make a game about how shitty let's make a game about how terrible New York is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, that would be a fun game for me to play. I'd be like, oh, yeah, the subway really doesn't run on time. Or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I remember when I was reading the reviews that people really didn't like Sally's story. Yeah,
so the way it works is you start out playing as Arthur, and so sort of this overall arc of the game is, so England, in this version of history, the United States never enters World War II, so England is left to fend for itself, and it is invaded and taken over by the Germans. However, this one island of Wellington Wells did a, quote, very bad thing that they have felt guilt about ever since, hence their reliance on this joy drug. But by doing that very bad thing, they caused the Germans to leave and let them be. And so we're probably going to be getting into some spoilers ahead. It's, I don't think it would be something that would really affect your enjoyment of the game, but just so you know, potential spoilers ahead for We Happy Few. So you start out playing as Arthur, and Arthur is like works at a newspaper, and he's starting to have memories of a younger brother that disappeared when he was young, and feeling guilt about it, which to feel guilt or to feel sad or anything in this world is completely unacceptable. So he starts to, and also completely unacceptable is to not take joy. If you don't take joy, you're known as a downer, which I thought was funny.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the sense of humor that I got from reading about this game.
Yeah.
But he starts to not take joy so he can try to remember what happened to his brother Percival. Arthur and Percival, getting very Arthurian here. On purpose. And it turns out that the very bad thing that happened was that everyone in the Wellington Wells gave all of the children, 13 and under, to the Germans. And then the Germans left them alone. Which, I mean, of course there are all sorts of very, very, very unsavory interpretations you can make of that. But that's something I was reading about it. I was like, okay, like I don't really believe that they would have left them alone for 30 years for some kids. But whatever, I can suspend my disbelief for that. Especially as this island becomes incredibly technologically advanced in their isolation. It's like, don't really believe this, but
that's not really how it works. But okay.
Yeah, like fine, okay, like I'll play along because it's a cool idea.
Yeah.
And so Percy was probably one of those children. So Arthur feels extreme guilt about this. Ollie has something else similarly. I can't remember exactly what his plot is. But Sally, whose arc is in the... Like, it's Arthur, Sally, Ollie, and then you kind of bookend it with Arthur. But Sally, it seems like, is trying to atone for being in relationships with abusive men.
Yeah.
Basically, is what one review I read. And I was like, yeah, like, that's not... I don't love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I read about it, too.
Yeah.
So I remember when people were first talking about this, it got a lot. I think because it was announced right in the, like, fever pitch of fandom for this. But it got a lot of comparisons to BioShock, and specifically BioShock Infinite. Which are valid to a certain extent. Right, you've got sort of the irreverent, like, announcer people, sort of old-timey, whatever. This one just happens to be a little bit more British.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I feel like those comparisons, like, did not do it any favors, right?
Yeah, it's hard to be like, oh, look at this indie game that got kickstarted, and, like, let's compare it to BioShock.
Yeah. Especially, like, because then, like, you know, you get the BioShock fans and they want something very specific out of you. Which I feel like can hinder, especially if you're an indie developer who wants your game to sell well, you know? It can sort of stifle the creative process in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that was another thing. They had to raise the price on the game and people were mad. They did it in a pretty humane way. You know, their Kickstarter backers were still going to get what they were promised. But because it changed from this kind of sandbox survival game to a game with a real kind of narrative and leaning more towards the action-adventure genre, they had to bump it from $30 to $60. I mean, I'm sure also because they were acquired by real companies who want to make money.
I don't think Microsoft... I mean, unless the ones sold on Xbox, I'm sure they do. But this is, like, something they set up before they were bought out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know. But still, if you're looking to be bought out, it certainly makes you more attractive to be selling your game for $60 than $30.
But, I mean, it's fair. I mean, they ended up putting a lot more into it than I'm sure they ever intended to. When they I'm
not saying
conceived.
It's not fair, but it does sort of throw yourself into this, like, toxic cesspool of hatred.
That's, like, it's all fandoms, right? It's not just games. It's just that games happen to be more digital of a medium, and so there's people who are more digital, and so you see more of it. But there's this like idea of like ownership over things that you didn't make. And I imagine that it intensifies, particularly when you have something like a Kickstarter or any sort of crowdfunding, right? It's like you feel like you are entitled to tell the developer what they need to do for you, which I find to be just silly. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's that kind of transactional relationship. I mean, yeah, you're right. It pervades kind of all media culture. Like, in the theater, you hear all the time about how, like, so people come out after Broadway shows, they wait at the stage door, right?
Yeah.
And especially now that it's become, like, a thing, the stars will usually come out to the stage door and say hello and whatever. But people get, like, pissy about it when people don't want to come out, or they get grabby about it when they do.
Yeah.
And it's just like, this feels like exactly what these people are doing with these games that they've kickstarted.
Yeah. Yeah. Even like big line stuff. Like there was a lot of hissy fitting over like Insomniac hadn't announced like a Spider-Man 2 suit. Right?
Right, yeah.
And they were just harassing them all the time about their Spider-Man 2 suit. And it's like, wow, look, clearly they had been planning the Spider-Man 2 suit way before you started like shouting at them about it. Or even like Persona 5 on Switch even. It's like, yeah, wow, they never thought of this. They have not thought about bringing their game to the Switch. Continue to yell at them about it.
Or like I was watching like a couple months ago when there was that stupid like Amazon stream where there was supposed to be a new Kingdom Hearts trailer and then there frickin' wasn't.
Yeah.
So I was watching that because I wanted there to be a trailer and there frickin' wasn't. But like the people on the chat were being like so irritating. It's like it's not like these hosts can skip ahead, people.
Yeah.
Like they can't. They work for Amazon.
Yeah.
They have to plug all the Amazon deals first. Like chill out.
Yeah. Just people can get so demanding over things and then get so annoyed when it's not like 100% exactly what they wanted out of it.
I mean, but like whatever, that's the price you pay for being on social media.
Yeah.
Right? If you want to tap into that network of people who might say incredible things about your game, like, and you want to feel like, you know, you can blast your stuff at them and say whatever you want to say, like, unfortunately, you have to take that back.
Yeah.
But man, I don't know how people have the energy for it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't like it when I get a game and I don't like it, but, like, usually I can recognize, like, why I don't like it and why someone else might like it.
Yeah. It's just like, I mean, I get that games are expensive, especially if you are on time with them. But, you know, that's the price you pay to be trendy, too, right?
Yeah.
Like, you could totally wait on any game and see what the reviews say and see what your friends say and whatever. And then you can buy it later if it sounds like something you would like. You know? Like... But with Kickstarter, it becomes complicated because they have actually given you
I know they
some
are your
amount
investors.
of money. Yeah.
But again, that's so silly. It's like, again, I've been in meetings where we talk about Broadway investing, and there are people that gather like thousands of dollars for these shows who essentially have no input. They come to meetings every once in a while.
Yeah.
And it's like, they know that, and everyone knows that.
Mm-hmm.
And just because you gave $20, you think you should be able to tell them how to make the game?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's one thing, you get into murky territory with Kickstarter backers who are giving you thousands of dollars, I think, right? Because those are people that, depending on the budget of your game, probably realistically should expect regular updates and some consultation.
Yeah.
Because they're investors in your game. But also, the terms of it are not that, right? if they could expect that, but they've, not worked out a contract with you that guarantees them that.
Yeah.
And if they did, they should go to you directly with that money and offer it in exchange for that.
Yeah. It also gets complicated with, like, stretch goals.
Right.
Because, like, you have this whole campaign planned out, and you're like, this is what I want to do with this amount of money. And then you get, like, way more than that money for some reason. Which sounds great, right? It sounds awesome. But, like, you have to think of things to do with that money then.
Well, okay, so the solution to that, though, is to just, like, say, hey, we're going to pay our team a living wage.
Fair enough.
Like, people get into hot water of their own accord with stretch goals. Like, shut down your dang Kickstarter early when you hit the money goal if you don't think that you're going to be able to expand
Can you do that?
I don't know.
Can you do that? I've never been under the impression that you can actually end your Kickstarter early.
Or make an update. Just make the update. Be like, look, we hit the goal. We're not going to change what we're doing. Thank you. You're allowing us to pay our people more and allowing us to work more humane hours, but, like, sorry.
But again, like, well, this is different because this is, like, a real, like, they're like a team, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of people who do Kickstarters are just one person, which I guess you could just say, thanks, I'm going to put this in my savings account.
Or, thanks,
But
I'll hire a better publicist. Like, thanks,
Yeah, I guess so.
I'll bring someone else on board to do some shading for me.
Yeah.
Like,
I was thinking about like the Lisa games with, like, Lisa the First was sort of like a free weird thing that was very inspired by Yume Nikki, and then they did a Kickstarter for Lisa the Painful, and one of the stretch goals was making, like, a sequel game. I'm pretty sure that they got, but they clearly had not expected to get.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like the third one feels less well thought out than the one that they were planning to make, which I guess makes sense, because they wouldn't know if they were going to be able to make it. But yeah, Kickstarter's complicated, whether it's
I just think
unsuccessful or successful.
People have to be careful not to get too big for their britches.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's hard when you have a really successful Kickstarter and there's a ton of money pouring in and you're like, I can make a giant game.
Yeah.
But, I just think, and again, if I was in that situation, I'm sure I would absolutely try to do the same thing. I'd be like, we'll do it off-Broadway.
Yeah.
And be completely over my head.
There's also, like, you get more money. Sure, you can do more things, but it's still going to take you longer. Right?
Yeah.
So then you end up sometimes with your backers being like, why is it taking so long? And you're like, well, because I decided to make it better than I thought I would.
Exactly. So, how are we going to mash these two games together?
You've overdosed on joy, and now you're tripping about having to gather 24 effects, and then the game ends.
Interesting. I have something similar, maybe. I think sort of a better meld is that you're too anxious to leave your home without taking joy. So we get out of the dream element. Joy is the only thing that allows you to leave your home, but, like, it makes the world look like all weird and stuff. But by using joy and venturing through the world and gathering the effects, you can eventually sort of start to piece together why it is that you're too anxious to leave your home without taking joy. And it's because of some kind of trauma.
That gets into a little bit of murky territory about, like, unintentionally commenting on, like, medication and anxiety. I feel like...
that was another interesting thing about We Happy Few. So it took a lot of finagling for them to be able to release in Australia.
Yeah.
Because the game shows positive, like, it gives you rewards for taking drugs.
No, Australia just bans all the games. It's just a joke. They have they have a lot stricter requirements on, like, what your game can be.
It was just so funny. Weird. It's like, obviously taking joy in this game is not meant to be, like, a good thing. Like,
yeah.
Yes, it does allow you to, like, pass through areas, but it's, like, bad also.
Yeah.
It's just like, do you all not understand what games are?
No. Not at all.
Clearly.
But yeah, that gets into a little bit of, like, I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I mean, I could make it, more mysterious, a little less clinical. But that's why. I mean, that's why these people take joy in this game, because they don't want to remember what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess if it's more specifically like if you're just anxious, it makes it seem like anxiety medication like warps your worldview or whatever. Which maybe it does a little bit, but it's not like bad like joy does.
You're right. I wouldn't want it to come across that. If there was a way to make it clinical in a respectful way, that might be good. But also, well, what if it's like this person can only leave though if they like overdose on their like take too much of their medication? Yeah, I don't love that either. Okay, but. Oh, we could come up with something spooky,
Take anti-ghost drugs. So when you go outside, the ghosts leave you alone.
Something like that, yeah.
Put on your ghost repellent. Yeah, I don't know.
No, that's sort of an interesting kind of start to something. It's, or like some kind of hallucinogen that blocks out bad memories. Like if you go outside otherwise, you like no, this all gets so clinical. It's so hard to match this like shut-in thing with this drug mechanic. It's like these don't work together super well in a way that's like super PC.
Yeah.
We could lean more into the missing children thing, right? So you're like one of those children that was taken away and you live in a cell and they only let you leave if you take like a hallucinogen so that you won't make a run for it.
Okay.
And through exploring this dream world, you figure out what happened to you.
That could be cool. You could even make it like sort of like you can like dream walk, sort of. Like, like you can't physically leave your cell, but you can sort of look around, like astral project yourself out and
nice.
Look around and discover what's going on in this facility that's holding you.
I dig that. I think that's our most promising idea so far.
Yeah.
It's hard, because I don't know. I like this idea of using the drug to leave the room. It's just so hard to execute it in a way that's not saying things that we don't mean to say.
Yeah.
Like, I think it would be an interesting game, but just because something should be an interesting game does not mean that you should make it.
Yeah. I think probably the key is, like, changing it from, like, in Yume Nikki, like, she's there of her because there's some psychological reason that she can't leave. But if you shift it to there being some external reason you can't leave, I think it becomes a little better. Yeah.
I think you're right. Mostly because it allows us to have a successful mashup.
Yeah.
So, that brings us to the end of this week's episode of Talk This.
It's Dangerous Podcast Club.
I wasn't sure if I was setting that up or not. I realized I said it in kind of an ambiguous way.
I don't feel like I usually say it, but then you paused, so.
I was afraid that you were going to jump in and, I don't know. That was bobbled. I bobbled that.
You bobbled it.
So if you enjoyed this episode, or you enjoy video games, or you enjoy myself and Emma, or you enjoy podcasts, or, I don't know, you enjoy things, you should keep listening. We love listeners. And the way you can do that is by finding us on all the platforms where podcasts are hosted. So that includes Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, hopefully many more soon. We're likely on the one that you use. If you're not, drop us a line. How do you drop us a line, you ask? Why, on our website, www.talkthispodcast.com. Got a contact form there that you can say, hey, you're not on Podcast Cool Corner. And we'll say, oh, you're right. How are we not on Podcast Cool Corner? And we'll get that set up.
We belong on the Podcast Cool Corner.
I know. I have to look that up. It's where our show should be.
Yeah.
But while you're on the blog telling us about the website, I'm getting ahead of myself, folks. While you're on the website telling us about Podcast Cool Corner, you should also check out our blog, where you can read Clickbait Boyfriend, about my boyfriend's playthrough of Kingdom Hearts. He's getting real close. He's real hype for Kingdom Hearts 3, people.
Hype.
You don't understand. He talks about it all the time. Also there you can read Split Screen, our off-topic corner blog, where we are watching Boys Over Flowers and My Hero Academia, and much hilarity is had, plus other blogs. And in the meantime, while you're on our website, why don't you follow us on social media? We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Talk This Podcast, and we're on YouTube as Talk This Sisters. And there's all sorts of good content on there that we'll talk about next week on our side quest episode. But in the meantime, Emma, are you ready to pull some new games from the hat?
I sure am. By the way, if you have suggestions for games that you want to go in the hat, let us know. But anyway, our old game for next time is Left 4 Dead.
Nice. Right for Alive.
Right for Alive, exactly. And our new game is Detroit Become Human.
Oh, man.
We haven't done that, right? No.
No,
okay.
You talked about it on a YouTube video.
Okay.
But we did not talk about it on the show yet.
All right, cool.
Are you excited to talk about it?
I'm very excited.
Left for Detroit. Our mashup is a GPS.
Yeah. But thanks for listening, everybody. Do you want to sign off, Mel?
Yeah, but first I want to note, I haven't actually checked the date, but I think this is the 2-year anniversary episode of Talk This.
I really thought it was the 20th. We just started in the 20s.
Well, we'll celebrate again next week. We'll celebrate every single week the anniversary of the 2 week and 1 week, the 2 week and...
Okay.
2 week and 1 week. Oh my god, I'm short-circuiting people. Let me just wish you well. Folks, have a week where you don't see any weird dreams or hallucinations, and you make a little more sense than I'm making right now.